Welcome to the Che Café.
Thanks.
So this is part of the official grand reopening, and it's been closed for about a year. You will notice very suspicious looking automatic fire sprinklers, paid for by the university, not by the students. That was a victory.
Yep.
And if you wander past the kitchen to the left on the west end of the building, you'll notice we now have an ADA, American Disabilities Act compliant bathroom. And that was paid for by the university, not by the students. And that was a victory.
Yeah.
We're celebrating a lot today, but the subject of this panel is very simply the success of the recent campaign to save the Che Café. 2014 to 2018 officially, because we just opened in 2018, and it took that long before we could believe that it would happen. A little background, this fight actually started, and we didn't even really know it. It came out in discovery during some of the litigation later on. But in the fall of 2013, the acting Vice Chancellor of Student Affairs wrote a memo to the Assistant Vice Chancellor of Student Affairs asking, how can we get rid of the Che Café before their lease expires? Almost in so many words. And got a very educational response back from the Assistant VC. And bad things started happening. And we didn't all quite know where it was all coming from and why. So we know not a lot more now than we did when it started happening. This is probably, as many of you know, the Che Café opens in 1980. There have been many, we count 5, attempts by the administration to shut us down. This is the closest they ever came to really achieving that. And we lost an eviction unlawful detainer suit in trial court. We appealed, we lost the appeal. And they actually put the 5-day notice to vacate on the building in March of 2015, which set off, we were ready for it, it set off the longest sit-in, the longest occupation of a building in UC history, statewide. 121 days. This place was boarded up, and we had a rapid response team ready 24/7 for people here to notify somebody that they should show up and tell the TV cameras to show up in case the sheriffs came to finalize the eviction. All that changed in July 2015 when the chancellor decided to have a meeting with delegates of the Che Café Collective and a delegation from the Che Café Support Network. Some of them are here today. And in that meeting, the chancellor basically said, we'll call off the eviction and we'll pay for the fire safety upgrades that we knew the fire code did not require. But as long as they're going to pay for it and not make the students pay for it, cool. So, fast forward, we're here. The concert after this open house, starting at 3. Before that, there's one of our alumni, Arnie Schoenberg, and his group, Los Contrastes, will be doing Latin American folk music, songs about Che Guevara, specifically. And then there's a lineup of bands going till 10 p.m. You'll have to go back through the door and pay for that if you want to stay for the show. Please don't freeload. All right. Can I introduce myself? I'm Monty Crippen, and part of the UCSD Co-ops and Collectives Alumni Association. Our panel is not all here, but lots of us are here. Going from my left, Susie Orlovsky, and she was one of the CCSN delegates to the July 15th meeting with the Chancellor. And she's currently vice president of the Coalition of Labor Union Women. She's been an activist in the UP Union on campus, and she's an alum. Jody Blanco, past president of the UC Faculty Association at UCSD, and he was part of a delegation of faculty that independently met with the chancellor in the fall of 2014 to protest the eviction plans. David Morales is a member of the Co-ops and Collectives alumni and the Che Café Collective member and an alum of UCSD. Fred Lonadier is an alum, past president of the UCSD AFT Union, and delegate to the San Diego Labor Council. Mario Torero, internationally known Che Café muralist, and then some. He was part of the Che Café Support Network contingent delegation for the meeting on July 15, 2015 with the UCSD Chancellor.
And the new mural up front.
Yeah, make sure you know that it's there, because it is new as of this month. Mo Al, student, is a former member of UCSD General Store Co-op, and one of the delegates from the 4 co-ops who sat at the table for the over a year and a half of lease negotiations that resulted in our new 8-year lease. Janine Webb, grad student, member and past head steward of UCSD's Teaching Assistants Union, UAW, and I'm current organizer of the Lumumba Zapata Collective, and a participant in the occupation of the Che Café in 2015.
A major participant.
Yes.
She was barricaded in.
Now. Susan Wingfield Ritter was one of the Che Café Support Network delegates to the meeting with the Chancellor on July 15, 2015, and long an activist in support of the Che Café and a member. And there's a few people who are not here. Our attorney, Andrea Carter, has been given all the instructions. That's her not there. She's in North Dakota. She's part of the defense team for the Standing Rock criminal defense cases. So she could not get here. So this is a short program, and we might do a whole day program on the subject. And we're not going to do any kind of a deep dive. We won't have time for it. We want mostly to show, and we could have had 10 times as many people show up for a panel. To show it takes a village. To show the movement was broad, and to talk about that, talk about what it took to put that together, to maintain it, and to keep it going as a non-defensive action. Now we're in the building phase. We want to really make the co-ops here thrive, and look forward to that. One of the handouts, please get it before you leave. One of the UCSD co-ops alum, Dr. Steve Dubb, has given a short rundown on what's happening with worker co-ops around the country, particularly focused on what local governments have been doing more and more to support their development, which is, everybody needs to know that, because we can lobby for it in our own communities. Pick it up at the front table. The other handout we want to make sure you see is our Co-ops and Collectives Alumni mission statement. We were formed in 2014 and during the middle of this fight, partly because we thought, you know, if alumni were involved on an ongoing basis, then the students wouldn't get taken advantage of quite so often, because administrators have historical memory and students don't. but alumni do. So we're here. And on the back is the preamble of the current 2017 8-year lease. And you wouldn't think that the preamble of a lease agreement would be a political document, but it is. Please read it. And please pay attention to the part that says you can join a co-op. Doesn't matter who you are. We need everybody who is interested to pick a co-op and start doing some volunteer work.
How much does it cost to join the co-op?
The co-ops are all nonprofit, so there's no cost for buy-in or buy-out. I mean, that's a long legal subject we don't have to go into today, but that's the short answer. They're not organized as for-profit. They're not organized as worker co-op corporation or anything like that. They're organized specifically as nonprofit 501c3, and their primary purpose is educational, teaching people how to run co-op businesses as opposed to making noodles of money. All right, so the question of the hour is what everyone thinks it took to win this fight to save the Che Café from eviction. And we can go around with brief openings, comments from our panel members who choose to or choose not to say that. And then we'll open it up to questions. And unfortunately, we have one microphone, so we'll ask people to come up and speak to the microphone because there is some recording going on. We want to make sure everybody gets included in the recording. All right, thank you and welcome.
Hi, everybody. This is going to be really brief. I'm active in Upton University Professional Technical Employees, CWA, Communication Workers of America. That's one union. And we represent about 15,000, 16,000 research, technical, and hospital professionals. And we're organizing student services professionals. We were proud to be in the solidarity strike with ASME workers a couple of weeks ago and the nurses union. And back when Monty came to me, he said, we need help, and our union always wants to, support students and the community at UC, and that's why we got involved. And it was really gratifying to be at that table with the chancellor, with some of these esteemed people over here, and speak truth to power, especially the students who were there. That's who he wanted to hear from. He didn't want to hear from me, but he wanted to hear from the students, and I think they really made his mind change.
I am also going to keep my comments relatively brief. I was part of a small contingent of faculty in the earlier part of the move to evict the Che Café in 2014, I think it was, and we just got a call from another faculty member of ours who had been talking to some students and met up with other faculty who had also talked to some of their students about how the Che Café was being evicted. And the first response among a lot of faculty is, well, yeah, this happens like every couple of years, right? They try to do it, and for one reason or another they don't, and then it just kind of goes back to usual. But I think that there was enough urgency in the groundswell of opposition against it that led us to realize that actually something much bigger was going on. So we met with the chancellor and we discussed our concerns, and I think that while many of us didn't really know much more about what was going on than what the students had told us, we realized it was enough to see the struggle to keep the Che Café as part of a larger picture that had to do with the dwindling of the kind of presence of co-ops in general on campus, and the disappearance of these kind of bottom-up community spaces that were being increasingly replaced by all of these buildings that you see here growing up on campus now, and being kind of doled out to various groups and organizations for research as well as a student organization. And I think a lot of us faculty who kind of grew up, with the whole sort of DIY sort of movement and aesthetic and indie bands and the underground, even if we weren't directly part of the Che Café, I think felt a certain solidarity and empathy with our students, and also with the community organizers like yourselves who are all struggling to keep it alive. And so that was about the extent of our involvement, really, although we've kind of stayed on the sidelines and tried to support indirectly in any way we've been able to.
I'm David, and I'm in a unique position in that I was a student here starting in 1987, right out of high school here in San Diego, and frequented this place, became a member of the food co-op, the recycle co-op, and inevitably the Che Café. Also went, aside from coming here and dining, came to a lot of shows, became part of a programming collective, ended up having children relatively young for most UCSD students. 25 came back and finished school probably because of that. My first kid's placenta is actually buried back there in the garden. So, needless to say, I've had a long history with this place. I was away from it for a long time. And when things, there's sort of this understanding especially in the community of people who come to shows, that every time the Che Café is about to be shut down, it never happens. So it's kind of almost like a running joke. And I want to concur with Monty that having been through several of these cycles, it was closer this time than it had ever been. And I can say that because I was looking at the administrative memos, I was looking at the current of what is happening on this campus and this society at large in the way of gentrification, and the fact that this space doesn't really serve where the university wants to be. And the kind of choices and consumer choices that exist now that are provided by a corporate structure that wasn't as entrenched in here is now sort of the norm here. And at the same time, there always seems to be, and the fact that you're all here today is testament to that, some desire to still have that in our midst. So what it took to save this place? Well, I came back here, I was hanging out with people who were the same age as my oldest kid, and as a result, I would have thought I understood them, they understood me. I got a real learning experience out of it. It was tough. You know, I get emotional still. I really do. Because I have so many memories of this place. I really do. And it took a lot. It was a lot of work. It was a lot of us who were experienced, knowing the next move. And there were people there, including Monty, back in the day when we were going through this lease struggle in the 90s. You know, Scott Kessler coming and talking to us when we were at the food co-op, etc. Whoever would come back. You know, that experience was so warranted, and I found myself echoing, you know, a lot of this sentiment. And it was really, really incredible when I think about it. You can tell just how I've kind of shaken up just talking about it. But the point is, it wasn't easy. It was not easy, and it's still not going to be easy. And you know, there's a lot that this space and all the co-ops as a whole have to do to accomplish their necessary place in the larger order, to show that there is something other than what the corporate order would have us do, including be a student, get out, go get your job, make your money, don't worry about everyone else, just, you know, make your place in the world. Well, we do it here together, whether we do it in absolute harmony or not. In the end, we're doing it together, and that's what, to me, was so magical about coming back here and being a part of this and being here right now, is that we got somewhere that really we were not meant to be, given the forces that were against us. And that's all I'm going to say for right now. But thank you all really for being here. It's really special.
Hello, Fred Bonadier. My first time in this building was when it was the coffee hut. Hamburger hut. See, I can't remember, it was so long ago. And I suppose I bought a hamburger, I don't know. But I arrived here in the winter of about '69 and entered the Master Fine Arts program in the fall of 1970. And so I have a very, very long relationship now with this campus. and I don't live very far away, and I'm still involved with the University Council, AFT, Local 2034. It's a organization, the AFT, in the UC system on all campuses, holding contracts for the librarians and the non-Senate faculty. So the UCAFT is a statewide organization that has contracts for librarians and lecturers. It had at one time, through most of my time here, a great number of Senate faculty, although the prospects of the Senate voting for union representation in the UC system was not great, but they continued their membership to pay their dues, and if you ask them why, they would say things like they wanted to. Well, another thing needs to be said, let me back up a little bit more, because what we're talking about with the co-ops are basically kind of movement things that came out of the anti-war movement, because the students on campuses across the country began to develop alternative things of all kinds. I remember I was in Seattle for a while, and there was the Alternative University, and a group that I was involved with there, Draft Resistance Seattle, we gave draft counseling in the Free University there, and this was all volunteer kinds of stuff. So that was a time when students were looking for alternatives to the corporate structure, to the war machine. And so when I arrived in San Diego, then the co-ops, I recognized immediately, if not specifically, but I recognized in general the kind of sentiment that was there, the cooperative sentiment that was there. So let's see if there's anything else I can maybe just ask some questions later. All right, thank you. Hold it close.
Yeah.
Kiss it, kiss it.
Thank you very much for inviting me to be in this panel, and I would have missed it because being in the underground and being in the forefront of the guts of the beast out there in the barrio is like sometimes the outside world doesn't know us as close as if I was in LA or New York or some big spotlight. But it never bothered me, because from the beginning, in 1970, when we created Chicano Park, and I was in my early 20s, I knew that that was the reason why I was in San Diego. At least I felt it, but all this time that has gone by has assured me that I have my place in history here. And I realized that in the 60s, late 60s, in the middle 60s, from there, we even were organizing at UCSD to create the Chicano Studies. And that process was an extension of what we've done at Chicano Park, because we wanted Chicanos, as still today, you don't see them on TV, on the movies, nothing. We are the most put down majority of people in California, at least, Southwest. So, but imagine how it was then in the 60s. So that forced us to create a liberation of Chicano Park and our movement extending, and look how far we've gotten. But organizing in all the universities was very important for us, because we were going to go into college. We didn't have that opportunity before, and now we have teachers and professors and students all en masse going in there. And that's how I got started and got involved here at UCSD in the early years. And then in 1993, when Angela Davis was returning to San Diego, to UCSD, we got together with the students and came up with an idea, which they kind of thought it might have been a mural. Probably that's why they contacted me, and I was in agreement with that, because that's what I do. I praise and lift up the children of the goddess, of those who fight for peace and justice in the world. And so the new mural, even right here, I never thought I would really paint Petlier and Shakur and Mumia in one spot here for keeps, because I have paintings of those and banners that we carry in the marches. What a history! But now it's here permanent, and there's still so much more work to do, and I'm so proud to be part of you. Thank you very much.
Don't forget the centro.
The centro.
Don't forget the centro.
Don't forget the centro. Imagine that. Nobody knows anymore about it. It's still there. Yeah, they're still there. They have their big parties. It's really quiet because an example of a sustainable culture, a sustainable nation like Cuba, when the world rejects it, the Chicanos, Mexican Americans, like we're the worst. We came together. We had culture. We had roots, and when we opened up the books, and and saw how great of a history we have. That was the movement that makes us all human beings, and that's the.
So you Google the Centro Cultural de la Raza.
Yes, in Balboa Park, Centro Cultural, and maybe put yourself on the list. But they just turned off the phone recently, and I haven't even had time to go and check it out. So please, we need help there too. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Mo, former general store member. What did it take to save the Che? It took a lot. That's all I could really communicate on that. It took a big chunk of my college career. Yeah, honestly, I thought about switching careers at this point. I'm also the current editor-in-chief of the Triton, the campus paper, Triton.news. One thing that I've been thinking about writing or having a writer write about is the Che Café and how it's a model for student resistance. Nothing on campus has been able to consistently resist administration over the years. I'm not really sure why. That's the whole reason we want to write the piece. Like, why has the Che been the sole surviving piece of resistance? At one point, all of the co-ops didn't exactly have a lease, and were just sort of occupying space. So there's something to be found there. I will end on. It took a lot, but the administration. We're listening to students, like Monty said. For some reason, the chancellor, apparently Chancellor Koslaw, really thinks he cares about students in a very paternal manner. We're like his children here. And he thinks he knows what's best for us. So speak to the students because he listens to us.
Hey everybody, my name's Janine Webb. It also took quite a bit of my college career. I'm a grad student doing a PhD, so it was a few years of my time here. Still finishing. I wanted to, well, let's see, how should we start? I guess to answer the question of, what did it take? I think that the chancellor only agreed, the administration here, the upper administration here, only agreed to talk to the students after a 4-month continuous occupation by students, UCSG students, and I think that's one of the reasons, that's one of the key reasons why this is here. Basically, direct action gets the goods. It's really true. Putting your body in a place and staying there, and having the sheriff saying that they're going to drag you out by any means necessary, quote unquote. We had early negotiations with the vice chancellor and the chancellor before this wonderful delegation formed. After they were willing to say, oh, we're going to call off the eviction. Before that, we met with them, and they made all kinds of threats to us, violent threats of we're going to have the sheriff come in and bring tear gas, drag you out, all these things. We had cops drive by a lot and come through at one point. But they did not do that. So I think, I think that was a big part of it. The other thing I want to do is give credit to basically the other occupiers who aren't here. I think it's really important to recognize that most of them are young women of color, and also who could not be here today. I want to especially give a shout out to Fabiola Roscoe and Raquel Calderon. I actually asked Fabi, she has to work today, and I don't know about Raquel. And she said, I don't mind shout out, but let them know I'd be there if the forces of capitalism would give me a fucking break. So, I miss them. So anyway, oh, and also queer people and crust punks and trans folks, like, you know, yeah, so recognize that.
Thanks. My name's Susan, and I created a little timeline of how we saved the Che, and I see some people sitting here right now that helped us save the Che. I'm looking right at Patricia Mooney. Monty and I crashed an event for alumni 3 years ago this weekend. Monty was told not to go in a leaflet, so that left me. And I went and grabbed every alum I could find. Oh, I'm sorry. Whomever's with Patty, tell me your name.
Mark Schultz.
Mark Schultz. They wrote the most beautiful letters. We got hundreds of people that weekend. Veronica, who was one of the occupiers, we walked all over campus. Monty scanned all those and sent them to the UC Regents and the governor. But to back up, the Che Café Support Network started in May of 2014, and many of us showed up in court while the eviction process was going on in October. And shout out to all of you here who helped gather those 14,000 signatures from musicians who had performed at the Che, urging the chancellor to negotiate in good faith. January through March 2015 was frickin' exhausting for me. I work full-time. I'm the clinical director of a pretty large agency in San Diego. And every effing Monday night, we were at the AS meetings. I see people here like Janet, who came to read beautiful letters to the AS, asking them, most of the students had never been to the Che, didn't know anything about the Che. They didn't know this was the original home of diversity and inclusion on this campus. When people were getting killed in this country for being GLBTQ, this place held dances for Lago. There's so many pieces. Scott Kessler, I interviewed Scott Kessler, and Chicano Park, a lot of the activists for Chicano Park were students here and helped start that. What blew my mind when I interviewed Scott Kessler was in the heyday of the Che, this is a direct quote, they were making 800 sandwiches a day. The recycling co-op was making $3,000 a month. Why would the university shut down co-ops that were doing that kind of amazing work? But anyway, back to the recent saving of the Che. Anne, I don't know where she just went, she and I walked into the Soho office in February of 2015, and we said, we need a historical consultant. So they gave us 3 names. Ashley Christensen gave us 3 names. I said, who's the most radical? Who would fight for us? She said, Jay McCaskill. I didn't know Jay was the president of Soho. So Jay agreed to be our historical consultant for a pittance, very little money. And another shout out to Fabiola Orozco, Jane Barlow, and Raquel Cisneros, who went to the UCSD library and began to do the research for us. We actually have a document almost ready for historical site designation, but we're thinking that maybe the chancellor might want to work with us on that now. So that could be like a really cool thing. The meeting that we had with the chancellor, I should back up before that. Just as Janine said, there had been ongoing talks with the Che Café Collective. Core members had been meeting with Vice Chancellor Gonzalez and getting nowhere, getting the runaround. And the chancellor was supposed to be the chancellor of inclusion and diversity, and I think he forgot it for a minute. So we had to help him understand that. About this time, during the occupation, the Justice Department, representatives from the Justice Department came to the university as a follow-up to the Compton cookout that had happened a couple of years ago. And at that time, Confederate flags were flying from dorm rooms. There were whiteboards throughout the campus, do you remember this? That had racially very derogatory statements, a desire to start a white student union. And so at the meeting with the chancellor, we just happened to bring copies of those things. And another thing that was absolutely extraordinary, Arnie was doing PowerPoints of the Che for Alumni Weekend 3 years ago. And I was supposed to stand out on the hill and catch anybody that might want to come on down. And I saw this beautiful young African-American woman. I said, "Oh, are you here for the Che PowerPoint?" She said, "No, I'm a student here, dance major, fine arts major." And she said, "I'm one of the president's scholarship students." So I invited her to the Che. When she walked over and saw the Black Lives Matter wall, she was very impressed. We walked through the garden. I told her what was happening. She wrote a letter. And we took that letter in. Jocelyn Ordans read that letter. Shout out to her. The thing that impressed me about that meeting, I actually have a copy of Esperanza's letter. It's poignantly beautiful. And what stood out for me in the meeting with the chancellor, well, first of all, Arnie was kind of freaked out, and so was Monty, because we weren't real organized before we went over. We just walked over, and the way we even got that meeting was the courage of Raquel Cisneros, Fabiola Orozco, David Morales. Raquel sent a letter requesting a meeting with the chancellor. A letter came, or an email came back saying, "Well, you can meet with the vice chancellor." And she wrote back that we wanted to meet directly with the chancellor because we wanted to prevent any untoward event happening where the police would be called out and document what was happening here if people were moved from the building. I'm sort of paraphrasing. So there was an incident between Fabiola and the chancellor, vice chancellor, where he got in her face during Triton weekend. And we requested he not be at the meeting because we were concerned. Nevertheless, he was at the meeting, ended up apologizing. I don't know if you remember that. And I remember the women in that meeting particularly. I remember Susie Orlovsky saying to the chancellor what the Che meant. He didn't understand what it was. And you explained.
I thought I had to keep quiet because I wanted the students to talk.
Well, the students did some beautiful, beautiful talking. Leah Ronson talked about getting married in this space. Susie Orlovsky talked about the Che being not just the building, the entire space around it, the generational piece, the history of inclusion and it being a safe space. And he listened. He listened, and when Esperanza's letter was read by Jocelyn, I think that really turned the tide for us. It was beautiful, and by the end of the meeting, he started talking about funds from the chancellor's funds to put in the sprinkler system, which, don't quote me on this, but I still think it's bullshit, because this is the only older building on campus that's had to have this. But okay, if they want to pay for it, that's all cool. I should probably stop talking. I love this place. The other thing was that in 2015, Soho named the Che Café on the 10 most endangered list. So all these multiple things happening together saved this space. Oh, well, I'm essentially done. That's about it. I'm just happy to see more people.
And Monty, I
coming in.
didn't wait till she said she was done.
Yeah,
Yeah.
go ahead. Give it her mic.
We'll have questions presently, but before we lose everybody, I wanted to do some credit where credit is due. Cameron, where are you? Okay, Cameron is our representative from the Che Café who's supervising the space today. Cameron, show your face. Everybody thank Cameron. So he's running sound and he's our supervisor for the space today, core member of the Che Café currently. And Ann is in the back.
There you go.
Where is there? You're not in the back. Shout out to everybody beforehand. Are in charge of our food service. And shout out to David Morales for making the arrangement with Peace Pies to get the vegan desserts delivered and get them ordered and get them here. Okay, enough credit. There's probably a long, long list of people I'm going to be ignoring and offending and not trying to. Everybody who did anything deserves a shout out. And even if you just signed one of those petitions that got 15,000 names in front of the chancellor. Okay, so I'm going to ask people to come on up and speak into the microphone so it can be part of the recording. We'll go back and forth with the panel and questions to the panel. Please come on forward, and we can form a queue off to this side. Let the panel members.
Patty.
Panel members can ask questions to each other.
Speaking of the murals and the muralists, I had a question for Mario. The Eyes of Picasso, did that help impel you to try and save the art here in this Che Café building?
Yes, because the art is a movement that's been going on from the first cave paintings that we made. It just, without art and culture, there's no society. And San Diego had not seen it until we got Chicano Park going. And the colors that came there have now gone through some changes. And now it's people. It's not just one color or two colors, it's a rainbow. So the murals is important, and Picasso's eyes was important at the time that I did it because I wanted to diversify the Chicano movement. And we came out hating Spanish because of what they done to us. But I couldn't hate Picasso, he's Spanish. So you can't be generalizing everything, and that's always been my teachings of how to bridge, how to create this, not tolerance, but actually acceptance of love of all humanity, that we're all the same. And here, you're right, Brother Fernando, that this area here is a place where it's blessed by all San Diego, because not even the other universities have what UCSD has. So this is one of a kind, and anywhere in here in Northern Baja Northern California here. Thank you.
I'd like to thank at Mesa College that also puts on excellent shows in this community, in the educational system. But I think we want to be careful about generalizing about thought, because there's an awful lot of good thought that goes on among the faculty and the students. And so the student movements and the Che Café and those organizations are part of that. And, you know, I was on the visual arts department faculty for many, many years. And many of my colleagues, if not all of them, they're certainly free thinkers in many ways, but also people in sociology. That's how we got a union going. In all the unions, we have about, 7 or 8 locals on this campus alone. I'd say there's probably 15 or 16 different unions throughout the UC system. In a lot of ways, we're as union as General Motors. And people don't really recognize that if it's not a Senate faculty person and it's not an administrator, the person's probably working under a union contract in the UC system.
Next question.
One of the things that struck me from the opening remarks, I believe it was you who said it, talking about the negotiations with the chancellor, was that he didn't know what it was. And once he learned what it was, then he started taking an interest in talking about saving it. So I'm going to take advantage of having such a spectrum of people who are involved up on this stage to ask, well, because I think that's the issue here, is that nobody knows, or a lot of people don't know. People can go to school for 4 years and have no idea what's going on here. So, and this is self-interested too, because I'm the editor of Triton Magazine, it's the alumni magazine. I'll do a story on this. But, so what I'm curious about from the spectrum here is, for those who don't know, what should they know about this place?
I don't really want to answer your question of what they should know, but I can tell you what I know leads to your question. And that is that this place and this university, and where it's posited, this was the original university. If you just came to school here within the last 10 years, you wouldn't know that. That all that stuff over there didn't exist. So at the time that this was the university, Revelle campus being the first real part of this campus, it was hard not to notice this place. It was hard to know early before my time that it was the original student center. And over time you had more building. When I came here in the late 80s, in 1987, the Price Center was about to open, and it was quite a protest and quite an event, and it was, there's pictures of it in the history. And it was like, what has happened since then, where we saw the dawn of the first corporate consumer culture coming to this campus, to now has just, it's been exponential to where it's very normalized. At the time when I was around here, it was very common to have so-called normies, as some of the younger students of this day refer to them, coming to the Che Café to eat lunch during the day, to study out here. It was very, I mean, engineering and science majors, etc., and people who weren't punks or hippies or freaks or whatever, which is what this place became associated with. So, what has happened is largely a push to expand this university for its commercial possibilities while jacking up fees, while making it so spaces like this have a harder time actually competing within the free marketplace of ideas, okay? And the whole thing about business planning and how to make these places viable didn't matter to me when I was in my 20s and I was a student here. That's something that over time became more important to me with different models and how they could do it. So what people need to know is that, to try to address that question now, is that this is a place that's going to be unlike this and the other co-ops, unlike probably any other place you'll work, in the sense of the decision-making process. They all use consensus, and that's not easy. But in doing so, you struggle things out in a way that doesn't just give you this edict coming from above saying, this is how it's going to operate, this is how it's going to be, you'll do your time, you'll move on, etc. The hard thing now is, because this university has become so cost prohibitive compared to when I started here, where it wasn't even $500 a quarter. I'm from San Diego, I lived with my parents, it was doable. People are trying to get out of here in 4 years or less. It was possible, back then the average for UCSD quarter system, people trying to double major was like 4.5, 5 years. And people, a lot of us, kind of made that stretch out because it could. So the hardest challenge right now is the turnover as far as the student base goes. This particular place is special because it has a lot of outside the student base involvement from a community that largely comes here for the musical events. But I want to touch on that too, because while that has largely sustained the Che and kept it open as a space, the events that I originally came to here were at a time when things, it's not like the politicization ever went away, okay, but I came here right after the South Africa Coalition was active on this campus in opposing apartheid. And yet the spirit of that was still in place. Some of you in this room were part of that. And the Che Café was a big part of that. GB Hajim painted a mural right on this side that's still there with Nelson Mandela and the African continent, etc. There were events here for Big Mountain in Arizona
Yeah.
when there was a struggle going on with native rights and strip mining uranium. And that was part and parcel of the Che Cafe's entertainment. It's like you always came and there was some component of that, a politicization of the events. It was numerous, there was just benefits for local causes, etc. So this place, if people are going to know anything, is that it has historically been that on this campus. If you have anything that you are passionate about that has to do with justice, with alternative economics, etc., this is one of the places that has always held that and combined this aspect of food and people coming together, and I don't want to call it entertainment, but music, art. You know, I was there when Mario came and painted over here, and I have a quick story about that and why Mario is so magical to me with the way he works with children, and I felt like a 20-something-year-old kid at the time. I showed up and he just handed me a paintbrush and he said, "Here, that's you, that's me. Painting is still out there, let's fill it in." You know, meanwhile Angela Davis was walking around and we were getting ready to unveil. And it's that spontaneity that has always been a part of this place that you're really not going to find too many other places on this campus. Aside from experimenting with drugs and alcohol in your dorm room, which became, this place became an alternative too, really. And I know that's an important thing in my life right now. So anyway, I don't know that I answered your question, but I feel like hopefully I gave it a little bit of historical background and what needs to be thought about in that respect.
If I may add a little bit to that.
Yeah, Chicano Park would not be Chicano Park if it wasn't for the art. It would be another park. And maybe you can't even separate it any longer because it's one. Because maybe you have a lot of arts centers around, and maybe you have a lot of murals over there. But when it comes together, it becomes another entity. It's living. It's wearable art. And so that's what's happened here. You can't separate the murals now from the center. Because if it wasn't for the murals, people would drive by and they wouldn't even know where the Che was. Because they don't read signs. It's just an old building over there. But it is the paintings that give the space no longer old or new. It just becomes something that people are attracted to. People see it, the colors, and then the imagery. I'm not joking when I said when I painted marks up there. It was one of those times that they were going to close it up because the paintings it's a threat. You know, that's why the school has no colors, and that's why we broke the ceiling when we did the mural at Peterson Hall. It wasn't supposed to happen. We needed a miracle, and that miracle was a very negative, evil thing that happened with the cookout. Such a scandal that it placed their minds on fire. Some people do feel hell, I suppose. But so you can't separate these things, and so that's what I say. We are ready right now to do the monumental sculpture installation in front of the building.
Yeah.
Something that you just can't go around it, right? A place where, you know, they didn't want the mural in the beginning. They were playing games with us, and then they had to swallow it. So, and now is the pride of UCSD. When the tourists come about getting the students to, they go there. Look how diverse our school is. Look at all the colors we have. You know? It's a whole complete reversal because their excuse is so weak that when the colors show up, they lose. And here we are.
Yeah.
To answer your question, what I want other students to know about this place, it's the history, things like the Cross-Cultural Center, the BRC, the Women's Center, all of that has a history originally connected to the Che Café and the activism that's happened here. looking towards the future, what I personally want to see for the Che is one thing the administration offered to us. They offered to tear it down. They were like, we'll give you a new Che, we'll tear it down. We actually rejected that.
And you can have porta potties
Yeah,
in the courtyard.
You can have porta potties in the courtyard.
This is real estate.
Yeah.
It's real estate.
Yeah. But an alternative to that is I want to call out to alumni and supporters of the Che to hopefully fundraise and foot the bill for new Che renovations. For the past year, I've been speaking in NASCO, and they've been willing to help out with the money. I want to see this place renovated into a housing co-op. It can still be a concert venue. It has a kitchen. It has bathrooms. You install showers. You install housing. One big reason students can't get involved on campus and can't get involved in co-ops is we're food and housing insecure. There's plenty of my friends here who struggle to feed themselves, who struggle to house themselves, who have to live in living rooms, and it's an awful way to live here at the UC. Yeah.
I'd like to accept that.
And if NASCO's willing to foot anywhere from $500,000 to $1.5 million, if we can make up the difference and install housing up to 10 to 12 students here for $500 a month, it can reinvigorate this space. It's very aspirational. I hope it happens within the next 10 to 20 years, and I think it can reinvigorate this entire side of campus.
Right on.
Thanks. I'm just trying to think aloud and piggyback on some of the other comments that have been made. I think that, one of the things I've always been kind of trying to figure out is that I work with a number of student groups on campus, mostly historically underrepresented minorities. And, one of the things I've always been trying to figure out is, what is and isn't getting lost in translation between the history of the Che Café and the other existing sort of initiatives that are going on around campus. And, when you think about like the founding of the Lumumba Zapata Collective, and then you think about the struggles that were going on around the Thurgood Marshall curriculum several years ago, and then you connect that with the events leading up to and including the Compton Cookout, the threat of black students to basically leave en masse from the university and transfer to another university because they didn't feel safe here. And you look at all of the ensuing sort of struggles that led to a number of reforms that the university pledged to do, which eventually ended up with the Black Resource Center, the Raza Resource Center. Pretty soon there's going to be an Asian Pacific American Resource Center, as well as the institution of a new diversity curriculum, a vice chancellor of equity, diversity, and inclusion, which wasn't exactly what the students were asking for, but we're definitely asking for a stronger presence of administration on issues pertaining to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And this is something that's been going on a UC-wide level as well. The Compton Cookout is actually not an isolated event. There are similar events that are taking place in UC Irvine, UCLA, UC Berkeley, UC Davis, and these are all happening. These are all been happening in the past 5-10 years, and so it is really part of some larger kind of thing. Where I think now, one of the imperatives, I would think, of the student community is to try to put together the pieces that, are happening here, are happening at Thurgood Marshall College, are happening in the literature department, are happening in the resource centers, the cross-cultural center, with the curriculum, and then, of course, ultimately the Che Café, because I think that the sense that I get from a lot of students is that, whereas a lot of them sort of sympathize spiritually and are very much in tune and in touch with the kind of discourses and the struggles and the language and the solidarities that take place in the Che Café, at the same time, there's also some, I guess, either challenges or resistances to being able to come here and try to figure out, well, how is this place going to be useful for me and for my friends? How are they going to invest or be a part of what I'm working on or what I'm concerned about? So there's a lot of, the whole aspect of it being a safe space, the whole aspect of it welcoming kind of an alternative music scene, the whole DIY aspect of it. I think there are so many things that resonate even today with so many students, despite the fact that the students obviously between the 60s and now are very different, and the curriculum is very different between the 60s and now, and the way that people understand things like liberation and revolution, very different now among the students as it was even in my generation. I was probably David's generation. I was born and raised in Detroit. We were also involved in a coalition against racism, So Sad, Save Our Sons and Daughters Against Gun Violence in Detroit. We also fought against apartheid in South Africa. We also advocated for Martin Luther King Day. All those same things I think we all share in that generation, and that was really, to me, when I look back on it, so much a part of the aftermath of the 1960s and the civil rights discourses that came out. I think that now, we also have to somehow take into account the profound differences that exist between my generation and the students that I teach today. And so, in terms of looking ahead, I guess it's just a way of reflecting the question back onto itself, but to be able to ask kind of how are these groups, these students that are meeting in the cross-cultural center, these students that are trying to find out kind of where the alternative, how is it that they'll be able to sort of see a usefulness for themselves and also a usefulness of the Che Café in their lives in the circumstances as they exist now among the students. Just taking the tour earlier today, I was just really struck and wondrous at all of the different kinds of possibilities and the history of possibility making that the Che Café has always expressed. And I think that this is a kind of thing that students would love to sort of be a part of if there were some translating mechanisms that would make it easier for them to see their involvement and investment in the kinds of things that go on here.
Jody, can I speak to that?
We need to wrap up.
Okay, we saw it in the struggle that people who'd been meeting with the Vice Chancellor were pretty beaten down. The students nowadays haven't seen the kind of successes we saw in the 60s and 70s, which is why it's so important to celebrate what's happened here. Anyway.
Okay, so I'm going to ask again if some of the co-founders of the Che are in the room. Did they leave again?
There's Scott.
Okay, Scott Kesper is in the house. Thank you. Oh, and Lorraine's here? Lorraine. Okay, we owe you for this day, for this space, that you started this. Thank you, and thank you for coming.
Yes.
But I'm going to report something that happened before we started this morning. Arnie Schoenberg, who was in charge of the historical tour and was helping to set up. He was here before everyone else, and the chancellor and one of the vice chancellors came on by and had this very serious conversation with him about how he was happy that he was the voice of reason and that some of the students were still mad at him. But that he paid for this and that he wanted to see it. So that's kind of I'd say that was kind of like a stake in the place, emotional stake, So that's good news. Okay, we're done. No, we're done. We have another event that needs to set up. Okay, and that is Los Contrastes. Coffee Collective alumni member Arnie Schoenberg, who is also your tour guide, his band is going to be doing Latin American folk songs about Che Guevara, and it's the beginning of the Revenge of the Che show, and the end, the segue of the open house. So please stay for that, and please help us finish eating all that food.